Hi, and welcome to another episode of SMECO Connects. I'm Sonja Cox.
And I'm Tom Dennison. Happy to be the co-host here. I'm the Vice President of Government and Public Affairs here at SMECO. Work closely with Sonja, and we have a great guest today. And we're going to talk a lot about the future. We're going to talk a lot about technology that is on the horizon. Well, it's here now, and it's going to become even more prevalent on the horizon. So, Johnny, if you could just introduce yourself, talk about your company, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. So my name is Johnny Ramondino. I'm president of a company called INVOKE. Our organization, its intent really is to help organizations understand how to apply technology in their business. Everybody is running a business and they're either providing a service or building something for customers. And so thinking about staying on top of other technologies that are there to help them do that is really difficult because you're so focused on being the best at what you are doing that trying to research all these technologies that are out there, know how to apply them becomes more and more difficult as there's an explosion of capabilities that is out there that's available to people. And so that's our job. We are out there constantly looking at what technology exists. Where does it make sense to apply that for certain businesses? How do we do that? And then provide advice to our customers and guidance on, well, this is your problem that you're trying to solve for. This is your goal you're trying to get to. Here's the technology that would get you there the fastest. Let me figure out with you how we get that enabled into your organization. So that's what we do for organizations.
So, and we work together. So can you talk a little bit about what you've done for us or what we're doing together?
Absolutely. So a big focus of what we try to do is think about implementing solutions that don't disrupt the business as a whole. Oftentimes when you have work with technology organizations or service providers that provide new technology, they ask you to go from one software to another software. And that's very disruptive to the business. A big focus for us is to think about how do we automate the work that you're doing already on the systems that you have in place today. And so we call these virtual employees or digital employees, and we can then train those digital employees to work on your systems, on your tools, on your Excel sheets, on your local homegrown applications. And that's what we've been doing for you guys. So we've been looking at processes in your organization that people are doing repetitively that are costing a lot of time and energy. And we will then teach a virtual agent to do that work. And now you can have them work 24/7 automatically. You get great quality control and you get great reporting out of it. So you can have insight on what's happening to your business as you start to deploy more of that.
Yeah, it's been great. Saved a lot of man hours or woman hours,
right,
whatever it may be. But yeah, we've done quite a few of our processes that way, and people have been really pleased with the way things are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One of the things that you hear a lot about today is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts around artificial intelligence? Where it is now, where you think it's going to be, how it may affect our members and people in our service territory.
Yeah, it's a broad topic. It's
right.
Top of mind for a lot of organizations. I think there's still a very, very small adoption on AI today. And I would say that you've got a few organizations that are betting the farm on it, and they're spending billions and millions of dollars, and they probably should. And then you have the vast majority that is kind of looking outside in and saying, let me dabble here and there a little bit, but don't really have a good direction on how do we apply this into the business. So what we're seeing today in terms of its capability, there is a lot of capability that's out there. There's also just a vast amount of organizations that are taking different angles on how to create value for companies like yourself with AI. So it becomes really confusing. Like, do I go and buy a subscription of $20 a month to do something, or do I pay $1 million on this one company that does all this other stuff? It's difficult for organizations to go and say, what's the right approach for us? And a big gap that we see from really large enterprises all the way to small businesses is figuring out what should be our strategy. How should we look at AI? How do we take it from what is there today to where do we want to be in a year from today? And given all these different options that are out there, it's really confusing. So that's what I see a lot. And so we see kind of these trials happening. Oh, let me throw this at it. Let me throw that at it. Or we see executives coming in and saying, figure out what to do with AI. And that's it. Like, that's the guideline, right? So there's these broad statements. And so people are scratching their heads and go like, all right, what does it all mean? So that's probably the biggest challenge we see today, is having a very clear and concise approach. How do we get started? Do we even need to? What problems are we trying to solve for? And what would a roadmap look like? What would the cost be like? What's a return look like? Like, those are really, really simple questions that you would think every investment would have, that you would want to answer. And it's very unclear for organizations to figure that out. So that's my first kind of review in terms of where AI is sitting. And as a result of that, you're seeing all across the board different things happening in a very small vacuum, without there being a good holistic strategy behind it, or a good plan to say, how do we execute on it in the long term? That's the first element of it. Does that help?
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, because I could see somebody saying, oh my gosh, where do I start? And if that's not your background, then you're going to need somebody to help you come up with that plan. But I could see it as a really powerful tool.
Absolutely. So the capability-wise, there's a lot out there, and there's obvious risks and constraints that we have to think about. We have to think about, how do we protect the data of both our organization and customers? How do we protect organizational IP in terms of understanding how your organization operates? Because that is IP that ultimately you may or may not want to build something with, or to get smarter at, and you have to think about, how do I position myself? Do I care that everybody else maybe knows this, or maybe whatever my AI provider is today, that they have awareness on it, or do I want to protect that? So there's some concerns there, but you can overcome that pretty easily. Once you know where you want to draw the line, we can architect the solutions to take care of it the way that you want to take care of it. So that's less of a problem, but it's a concern, because not everybody knows where to draw that line. And then capability-wise, there's quite a bit of capability. And so it's almost thinking about, where do I want to focus? So do I give everybody the new version of Excel that's now AI-driven, so now everybody's 10% more productive, or we hope they are, right? More personal productivity tools. Do I think about it as, I want to go all the way to the other end and build an AI platform solution for me as a company, or somewhere in the middle where I use AI to think about, how do I better the processes that are operating in my business? So those are kind of three different categories that oftentimes get kind of fuzzy when people are thinking about AI, because they're not categorizing the type of work that they want to do. And as a result of that, it's kind of a hodgepodge of what they're doing. But in each of these categories, there's great capabilities. And there's a lot of potential to think about small investments that have good, consistent wins, and allow you to almost educate your employee base on what is the art of the possible. And I think that that's really a very important consideration. We like the idea of starting small, showing the value, and educating on how AI can assist the business, because that allows us to get people thinking about, what else can I do with it? Because to me, it's going to be less about who's got the best AI tool, and more about who can enable their workforce the best way in using these new tools. And I think that's kind of the direction we would like to take.
Well, I think that's the important thing. It's like, don't do it just to do it, right?
Right.
You need to have a business reason to do it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned business processes, so that's another thing, another question. It brings up another question in my mind anyway. So do you need to take a look at your business processes first, and then if you need to tweak that process, you can, and then go with AI, or can you do it at the same time? Yeah,
it's a very good question. We've had that conversation for the last 10 years almost, and I would say absolutely don't spend time on restructuring your processes first. As part of any implementation, we will always look at, are we doing the right thing? And because we're already trying to understand the process, we're already doing a deep dive on that process. The other element of that is, when we find inefficient processes, there's always the, why are we doing this in the first place? So we'll uncover, are there really needs for some of these inefficient or not optimized processes to begin with, and there may be good reasons for it. And if they're not, then two things will happen. We can optimize the process itself, but we can then also optimize it for AI or for technology. Because if we think about it, let's say you have 20 people working on a particular process, and you're starting to find out, spend maybe 6 weeks figuring out, oh, we can cut out these 2 steps and make this step faster. Now you've optimized it for those 20 people, but if we take that same 6 weeks, we could have optimized it and automated 80% of it. And then it's like, all right, well, I did 2 birds with 1 stone type of situation. So we're not blindly going to automate what is out there without questioning the efficacy of the process. So we would like to do it together. The other element I would say is oftentimes we use AI to discover inefficiencies on the process. And so we can use AI to monitor or to translate activities and find out where are there maybe things we're doing that is not really good and that we should re-engineer. So certainly think about, let's look at what is it that we want to tackle. Then we'll do the work together with AI or just with deterministic workflows. You don't always need AI.
So do you use Lean or one of those programs when you're looking at business processes?
Yeah, the concepts are very much around the Lean Six Sigma type of concepts. It's infused with kind of a thinking around what outcomes do we want to drive towards, and sometimes that translates, there's a few combinations I would say that translate to it. There's the optimization of speed and execution and quality, and then there's the element of cost, right? Sometimes speed is way more important than cost, and sometimes it's completely the opposite, right? We don't care when it happens, but it needs to be a lot cheaper because we're spending too much money on it. And so those have big impacts on how do we engineer it, but there's always the element of what's the best process overall. It may not be fully aligned with the Lean Six Sigma because when we look at what it is that we want to do, we may want to chop up the process a little bit less efficient than we otherwise would do because it may be a lot cheaper to do that. So we leverage the Lean Six Sigma approach, but we try to be pragmatic towards what is the outcome we want to achieve.
Okay.
Yeah, and this has been great conversation so far, and I kind of want to shift a little bit to some of the challenges that go with AI. And I think it'd be interesting for our viewers to know, we here at SMECO, we do yearly, we do simulated disasters where we have to do emergency preparations, whether it deals with, and it's all simulated. It's, very much in concert with a number of different organizations. So one of the things that happened in our recent ERP drill, emergency response plan drill, was to combat an AI-generated message that took a podcast and literally had Sonja's voice used to talk about a workforce reduction at SMECO. So that, fueled by AI, was something that I and our communications team had to figure out how to combat. So that's just kind of one example of something that we are sort of looking at from an AI perspective. So the benefits that come with it also have some challenges. So if you could, based on your background, talk a little bit about some of the challenges that come with AI and the adoption of it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very interesting use case that you've got. I mean, there's a lot of deep fakes and all sorts of other
deep fake. That was the term. Yeah, that was the term. Yep.
Yeah, and there's more and more out there. I would even say, even for a lot of the scenarios, when you think about social media and things like that, they're not even as smart as that. Some of them basically use video overlay where you see maybe a famous person, and then the video that they want to promote, kind of hinting at the fact that the famous person is promoting the video, right? Even although they're not. So they're kind of snippeting things together in a smart way. And historically that's always been done. Now AI allows you to do that at scale, fast, and eerily difficult to sometimes determine whether it's real or fake. And I think that will be harder and harder for us to do. There are organizations focusing on exposing fakes. So there's entire software companies that's all they focus on. Legislation is really difficult. In fact, the recent changes in the government legislations may make it even harder for us to combat some of these things because there's, I think the Trump administration has kind of put together a framework of allowing AI to kind of roam wild a little bit because they want to promote kind of creativity over what I would say more restrictive legislation. So there's certainly an appetite. There's almost like a race, right? Do we want to be more innovative and try all these different things out because there's something really great can come out of it and the next really big economic advancement can come out of it? Or do we want to have more of a regulated situation, which Europe is more aligned to, and protect everybody that's out there? We're at a moment where we're swinging the other way, where we're a little bit more lenient towards some of that stuff, and we're going to get we're going to get some black eyes with that, right? And I think there will be a lot of iterations in courts in cities and states, and even on the federal side, where people are trying to decide, what do we do with this, right? And what is the actual economic impact and things like that. Ultimately, I look at it, whether it's AI or not, as, fraud is fraud, right? And
Right.
so if you do harm by somebody, to me, it's no different than stealing or doing something different outside of AI technology, and it should be handled that way. Whether the courts and based on legislation, how they handle it, can vary greatly depending on where and which court you're even looking at. One of our customers is a law firm. One of their focus points is understanding different legislative impacts of AI in different states, and
Right.
it's a whole field of study. So it's pretty difficult. So I think, back to your point, a few different elements. One is, I think, can you put governance components in place to try to mitigate as much as possible self-inflicted wounds? And that's yes. Oftentimes the term we typically use is we have robots that govern AI. So we have what I would call deterministic robots that have workflows that listen to not, hey, think what you do, but more so, these are the things I want you to follow. They're very, very structured and rigid, and they control AI. You even have other AI elements be kind of the governor of different AI models, if you will, or decision steps. So you can kind of have the self-governing model in there that you can build into your AI solutions that you deploy, so that you have oversight. Really stupid example, we have really complex documents and contracts that we read. And when we do that, we may have, a particular phrase or a particular ID, let's say a social security number or a car VIN number that we get out there. When we label those, we can then take steps to say, okay, let's validate if this is a valid social security number or a valid VIN number, and take maybe other steps to go and say, does it match with the name of the person or the type of car that we're looking at? So there's deterministic components that we can do when AI has given us something back that provides us fallbacks on control so that we can mitigate problems that we can control. The bad actor situation is really difficult because you're putting things out there, which I think is healthy to do, and as with any security constraints that you have in your organization, any endpoint to your organization can be taken advantage of, right? And I think we live in a time where it's really difficult for us to shut ourselves off from the world just because we want to be secure. There needs to be a happy medium. And unfortunately, that may mean that we have to put in place processes that we monitor. We may monitor, is there something going out there that we didn't sanction and that may be negative, and we may need to have a response plan in place to counter it or mitigate it or provide fast responses, because it's the only way we can combat something what you just described, right? If something like this happens and we're silent for 3 weeks, people are going to be worried. Right. But if we respond within a day or less, then people are like, all right, we get it. Let's now dig into it, and there'll be a lot more accepting to it, and it allows you to mitigate some of the fallout. But yeah, there's going to be some black eyes for sure.
Yeah, and I think you can take two approaches, right? You can stick your head in the sand and pretend that it's not happening, or you can understand the reality that this is part of the future. And one of the things that we're wrestling with right now here at SMECO is the demand for electricity for these large data centers that house AI technology, for lack of a better understanding of it from my perspective. So we're working through that, and it's larger than just SMECO. It deals with the entire state, deals with the entire PJM grid, which is 13 states, trying to make sure that the power is there to do it. So from your perspective in the technology space, these data centers are going to come. They're going to locate somewhere. Kind of how do you see that process developing over the next couple of years, I guess?
I think there's a really good opportunity here. What I've seen so far, not being super close to every aspect of it, is that I think there's a lack of communication. So there's a lack of the different parts of the industry coming together and doing some planning and having some conversations about what does it mean, how can we structure these data centers? How do we even appeal to these data centers to come to us, right? Because there's a benefit commercially. What does it mean to the power generators? What does it mean to the existing members? And what does it mean to organizations like yourselves, as well as those that want to build these data centers? there's not enough communication going on. We see people throwing out that they want to do something, other people just trying to guess what does it mean and organize around it. So I feel like there's a lot of room here to just streamline that process better. And I think there's a lot of options available, but not everybody is aware. Or the lack of communication is not allowing people to start structuring the conversation in a guided approach. So, for example, you may have somebody looking to build data centers. They have multiple options to go to. Everywhere they go to might be already a strained grid that doesn't have the capacity. So even if they want to go to one city or another, or one location or another, they're having the same conversations. And so I think there's opportunities to go and say, let's go plan a little bit on what we think the demand is going to be. Let's start thinking about what are the conditions that an organization like yourself would require to do this safely, both for providing guarantees back to these data centers as well as your existing members, and what does it mean in terms of requirements that I need from where I purchase my power to be able to have the capability to do this reliably. So that planning, I think, would be very valuable, as well as allowing you to say, okay, I need a minimum of this commitment from somebody who wants to put a data center in. So now I've got something to talk about. I need to have a conversation with the power suppliers and say, this is what you're going to be able to give me. So I may need to broaden where I find my power, and I need to have the right conditions to do that so that it doesn't become a power struggle. So like all of those things, I think, need to be planned out a little bit. And it might require us to put in a new position to think about this kind of demand management of power. That may already exist. I may not know, but if it isn't formalized, maybe there's somebody that needs to be responsible for that, to structure that for co-ops and for other distributors, and certainly for maintaining the grid appropriately, to think about how do we go in each of these directions and start having the conversation to say, yes, I want to support you. This is what I need. This is what I know what my backlog is going to be, or the limitations are going to be, so you are better prepared. That's, I think, a big gap that I see. The second part is just thinking creatively. I see a lot of opportunity where we can be smart about how do we create demand or create options for purchasing power that haven't really been explored a lot. I was talking to an organization, I think somewhere in Texas. They've mapped out geothermal heating spots in Texas, and they can nearly support like a full gigawatt power plant or data center requirement from one hot spot. It's like, that's cool. Are you doing this nationally? And they're like, no, not quite, right? So there's options that are there. It doesn't always have to be like that, but I think if we start thinking creatively, both in terms of what the demand needs to be and what are different options available, we can go back to the power generators and say, how do we get there? And how do we start thinking about expanding whatever is out there, and maybe even making what I would say demands back to the federal government to go and say, this is what we need, right? Because I think if the current administration is saying we want to fuel AI, great. How do we put the infrastructure in place to do this? Right. If we don't do that, we're going to stronghold ourselves into a situation where demand is there and we're all going to be out of power at our home to support it, right? I think that's kind of where we're at. So I think there's good opportunity. The structuring and the conversation feels very immature at this point, and I would like to see that change.
Well, we were having, so I guess it really ramped up for us probably in first quarter of this year.
Yeah,
And
certainly.
Tom was getting calls, I was getting calls, engineering was getting calls. So we put together a team of people
That's fantastic.
that needed to be involved. And now all calls go through Tom first, and he decides when and if we bring engineering into play.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think there's, I know the demand is certainly more than we expected, and there's kind of always a question of like, hey, what are the best conditions and everything else. But I think there's a really good opportunity to organize it and figure out how do I track the right customers, and how do I plan this out the right way. It's going to be different for everybody based on the situation that they're in, but I think there is a good opportunity to get a little bit more formal around it, and it's great to see that you guys have put a team together, because I think that's step one, right? In order to figure out how do we even respond to somebody wanting to do this.
Yeah, no, and I think to your point, instead of building the plane while you're flying it, try to understand and put some structure around it, and I think that's the challenge for any utility right now is the there are so many moving parts. I mean, you have county governments that want to try to attract these facilities because of tax revenue.
Yeah.
You have massive businesses. I mean, we're not talking, we're talking the largest of the large businesses that have a piece of this. And then you talk about power generators, you talk about utilities, and then you talk about the government and the regulatory agencies that oversee all of these things. So there is a definite need for collaboration, and I think we're all kind of getting there right now. And like I said, you can take this one of two ways. You can either understand that it's going to happen and try to prepare, or you can put your head in the sand and just pretend it's going to go away. And I would rather prepare than just pretend it's going to go away, because I don't think it's going away.
I agree. I mean, I think even as simple as if we have a plan that says over the next 18, 24, 36 months, this is what is going to happen, being able to present that back and being able to start having the conversations with those counties that are trying to attract these businesses so that they know what the impact is, going back to whether there is support needed on power generation or on legislation. I think those are all vehicles that we can then use, because we can give data that's tangible and we can show the economic impact potentially as well. And I think it's all over the board a little bit today, given that everybody's scrambling to figure out what they need and how we get organized around it. I think as we do a little bit more of that, ideally, I'm hoping that when we do that, there's going to be a little bit more support on figuring out how do we grow the grid and the supply side of it so that we can do this responsibly.
Well, was there any final thoughts that you have before we wrap up?
I would give a few thoughts on kind of this whole topic of AI. I would say that most organizations that we're talking to, they really want to figure this out because they understand there is a good value. And I absolutely agree with that sentiment. I would say a few things. The first one is it doesn't have to be expensive to get started. So if anybody puts a really large check in front of you, I would question that, right? And don't get me wrong, there are initiatives that cost a lot of money, and some of the things that you have to do, are not simple to do, so they will take time and money. But I do think that you can do things in piecemeal. Even some of the things that we've done together recently, where we looked at really big problems like predictive maintenance, where we've started it out, but we know it's a big problem to solve for, but we started it out in a very cost-effective manner to prove out that we can do it, to prove out that there's value, and then kind of get the snowball going. I think that's the right approach. It allows both the customer and, quite frankly, the engineers on our end to validate, because we may go and say, oh, it'll take us this much to do, and then we get into it like, we know there was more to it than we thought. So I'd like to do something really small, prove out to you that it's possible and the value is there, but also prove out to us to say, oh, we were like 70% right. It's really this or this. And we can then course correct without having massive investments going on. That approach, I think, is something everybody should be looking for in whatever partner they choose and whatever technology that's out there, is to have a little bit more of, I want to dip my toe in the water, prove it out, and then use that as a cycle to do multiple phases and to grow that capability. So I think that would be certainly my recommendation. And the second one would be, as an organization, similar to what you're thinking about putting a team together, it would be good to have some sort of at least committee that says, okay, what is it, not just with AI, but what is our business objective and where does technology fit in? And how do we want to use these great technology that are out there to leverage it? We can then work our way backwards. What part of it is AI? What part of it is external AI? What part of it do we have to build internally, and all of that stuff? So those would be the guiding principles that I would say I would leave everybody with, to say, don't wait, get started, but don't think about this as I have to write a really big check to get started, because it can be done in piecemeal.
Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
I mean, Sonja, I think we've done a number of these podcasts, and we try to touch on all kinds of different subjects. And this has been, a really educational one for me, and it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for everything you do.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Johnny.
All right.